America Looks Abroad. This is the 49th in a series of broadcasts presented by the staff members of the Foreign Policy Association, a nonpartisan organization which offers accurate information on world affairs. Today's subject is the struggle in the Eastern Mediterranean. The speaker is Mr. David H. Popper, Research Associate of the Foreign Policy Association. Mr. Popper.
Good afternoon. Today our election campaign is reaching its whirlwind climax, but after next Tuesday, American eyes will be turned once more to the struggle in Europe and Asia. The most recent maneuver of the fascist powers, Italy's attack on Greece, brings to 10 the number of countries penetrated by the Axis armies since the war started in September 1939. Exactly what is happening in Greece is still concealed by a barrier of censorship and a smokescreen of rumors. It is evident, however, that only minor military operations have so far been undertaken. We do not yet know whether this is due to bad weather and the rugged terrain, as the Italians assert, or whether it results from a conflict on procedure between Germany and Italy, which caused Mussolini to order an attack before the fascist armies were fully deployed on the Albanian border, or whether the invasion of Greece may not be simply a ruse to draw the British forces in the Eastern Mediterranean into a great strategic trap. In any case, the military communiques do give some information about the immediate objectives of the special mountain troops engaged on both sides. The Greeks are fighting a delaying action in the difficult passes near the border and have pushed their troops into Albania to threaten Italian communications. The Italian attack shows signs of developing in two directions. First, it is moving southward, parallel to the coast so as to isolate Corfu, Cephalonia, and other strategic islands opposite the foot of the Italian boot, which might serve as jumping-off points for British forays against Italy. If this proves to be the main line of advance, the Italian forces might soon reach the Gulf of Patras in Corinth, which divides Greece almost in two, and then, with support on the sea and in the air, turn eastward toward Athens to split Greece in half. At the same time, a second fascist column has begun to strike eastward from Albania, toward the town of Florina. From this point, a railroad winds its way to the great port of Salonika, which the Allies occupied during the 1914 war. Salonika is important both because it serves as a commercial outlet for a good deal of the Balkans' foreign trade, and because it is only 150 miles from the Dardanelles, a key point in the strategy of the Eastern Mediterranean. Italy needs more bases in this area. Once in control of Greece, the Italian Navy and Air Force could put much heavier pressure on the British fleet and the troops in Egypt. The line of supply for the Italian army in Libya and Egypt, which is now subject to damaging attack by British men of war, could be given greater protection. On paper, the odds against a successful Greek resistance are nothing short of overwhelming. The Italians are said to be using 10 or 11 divisions, totaling 180,000 to 200,000 men, and may easily have allocated 500 airplanes to support the advancing army. Munitions and supplies should be fully adequate for a campaign of a few weeks. On the Greek side, it is doubtful if even 125,000 men can be equipped and maintained in the field for any length of time. The Greek armaments are on the whole antiquated. The Air Force, amounting to 100 to 200 planes, is largely obsolescent and is not believed to possess large fuel reserves. Anti-aircraft guns are almost completely lacking, and the Navy is negligible. Even the political situation inside the country may be a drawback to effective resistance. Since August 1936, dictatorial power has rested in the hands of General John Metaxas, who was consistently favorable to the Axis before the outbreak of the war. Notwithstanding Metaxas' policy of repression, the country has remained a hotbed of political intrigue, with the old Venezuelist elements favoring a restoration of parliamentary government, and King George II, British by birth, seeking closer ties with the Western democracies. Now, as Greece mobilizes, the fascist press at home and in the Balkans has started a propaganda campaign, predicting the overthrow of Metaxas and the banishment of King George, both leaders to be replaced by fascist puppets. If Greece must continue to go it alone, the hopelessness of the losing battle may play into the hands of fifth columnists, who would speedily end the war. But against this contingency stands the Greek national spirit, fortified by centuries of tradition and the possibility of outside support. That possibility is meager, for the tactics of the Axis, a cleverly executed creeping conquest of the Balkans, have isolated neighboring states which once were considered almost as Greek allies. Yugoslavia is virtually surrounded by the Axis, and countries which are now fascist vassals, and it is plainly ready to fall under fascist domination like a ripe plum whenever Mussolini and Hitler so desire. The Turkish government watches the steady approach of hostile forces, not only in Greece, but in Romania, where German troops are gathering in increasing numbers near the Bulgarian frontier, ready to dash southward toward the Dardanelles or the Aegean. Turkey does not dare to weaken its own defenses by attempting to strengthen those of the Greeks. Indeed, it may be holding aloof in the expectation of Soviet help if it is subjected to direct German attack. The Turks are bound by treaty to lend Britain all the assistance in their power in a Mediterranean war, but such obligations mean very little today. Thus, one by one, the Balkan states which were unable to unite for resistance are succumbing separately. There remains, in fact, only one active source of resistance to the fascist advance in the eastern Mediterranean, and that, of course, is Britain. The British are pledged to aid Greece by a guarantee given on April 13, 1939, when the Italian occupation of Albania endangered Greek security. On October 28th, when Italian troops crossed the Greek frontier, Winston Churchill promised to give Athens all the help in Britain's power. Since then, the British fleet in the eastern Mediterranean has been active. Certain waters around Greece have been mined. How completely, it is not known. Some dispatches tell of the occupation of strategic islands off the Greek coast to serve as naval bases from which to cut Italian sea communications, and of support by the Royal Air Force. And early this morning, the First Lord of the Admiralty revealed in London that British troops had landed on Greek territory, although he did not disclose how many there were or where they had gone. But the official British communiques, as distinct from other press reports, are almost completely silent on events around Greece. Some of this reticence is no doubt due to a desire to preserve military secrecy until the conclusion of whatever action the British may contemplate. Some of it may also represent a desire not to rouse false hopes, since British help to the Greeks will probably consist mainly of naval aid. For ever since the French yielded to Hitler, the British have been carrying a terrific burden in the eastern Mediterranean. The crack French force in Syria under General Weygand, which was supposed to come into action at just such a moment as this, is disintegrating in idleness. The British Middle Eastern Command, seriously outnumbered, is fighting against the Italians in the desert wastes of western Egypt, and further south in the colonial territories around Ethiopia. In spite of great handicaps, the British have thus far put up a successful defense. Marshal Rodolfo Graziani, who leads the Italian troops invading Egypt, has been hampered by British interference with his sea line of supply from the homeland, and harried by the planes and the motorized desert corps of his enemies. It is quite possible that the Italians began operations in Greece precisely in order to draw the British forces away from Graziani and thus make his task easier. If that is true, the Italian efforts have so far miscarried. From their newly occupied naval bases on Crete and other Greek islands, the British may make the Italian sea lines across the Mediterranean even more precarious than they now are. But in the long run, Britain, being without adequate manpower in this area, is confronted with a dilemma. If it aids Greece on land and in the air, it weakens the defense of Egypt. If it does not, it allows the Axis to strengthen its position in the eastern Mediterranean. By all the signs, the British incline toward the latter course, restricting their aid and attempting to minimize the Italian gains in Greece by occupying Crete and other strategically located islands as protective outposts. There is still one possible ray of light in the situation. In the course of operations, the Italian fleet might be trapped into giving battle to the British, and thus the core of Italian sea power in the Mediterranean might be destroyed. In view of the caution the Italians have hitherto shown, however, such an event seems hardly likely. The tempest in the eastern Mediterranean is only one part of the great disturbance which is hovering over the old world. The domination of the British Empire rests essentially on the control of key positions along the line running from end to end of Europe, which enables the British fleet to blockade its opponents. If we glance from left to right on the map, that is, from west to east, we view a great panorama dotted by the British strong points. They support a line which is gradually crumbling under the assaults of the fascist powers, but which still holds. The attacks are concentrated in 4 focal areas. First, the stronghold itself, the British Isles, is under pressure by sea and by air, but has thus far resisted German preparations for an invasion. Second, the Axis has maneuvered to destroy the value of Gibraltar, and there are signs that a military campaign for this purpose may soon be undertaken. For such a campaign, Hitler must have the assent of General Franco to the passage of German troops through Spain, and he must also have some assurance from the French that his efforts will not be sabotaged along the line of communications running through France. The Führer's conversations with Franco, Pétain, and Laval during the past 2 weeks may not have ironed out all the difficulties inherent in this project, but they have secured a pledge of general collaboration in European affairs from the French government. Meanwhile, a political struggle is going on in France over aid to Germany by such methods as placing French naval bases and ships at Hitler's disposal. To take the fortress of Gibraltar would be a difficult task, but to make it useless as a base for the British fleet would be relatively easy. Air bases and heavy artillery on the Spanish mainland and across the straits in Morocco would make the waters around Gibraltar much too dangerous for British vessels. In the event that Gibraltar is surrounded, the British might still continue their blockade of the Mediterranean from a base in Portugal or Madeira, or even from England itself, but such a blockade could hardly be completely effective. The third position along the British lifeline subject to attack is the eastern Mediterranean area. There, as we have seen, the Italian pincers is attempting to squeeze Greece and Egypt in its grasp, and thus gain control of the Suez Canal. If the Italian drive succeeds, Britain will be cut off from its Asiatic empire, except via the Cape of Good Hope, and the Italians will restore sea communications with their East African possessions. German and Italian sea raiders and merchant vessels will eventually have free access to the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. Fourth, the German drive in the Balkans, which is being intensified on the heels of the Grecian campaign, seems more and more clearly to be directed across the Dardanelles and into the Middle East itself. Here the principal stake is the great oil reserve in territories largely under British control. Beyond Syria and Turkey lies Iraq, the land of the Garden of Eden, with an annual output of over 4 million tons of crude oil. Beyond Iraq lies Iran or Persia, with an annual production of over 11 million tons. If the Axis powers could gain control of these regions and ship the oil back to Europe by water, their fuel problems would be solved. Or, as an alternative, the Soviet Union might be given a free hand in this area in return for its acquiescence in Axis advances elsewhere. But in any case, penetration through Turkey would provide a direct totalitarian threat to India in exactly the same way as the old Berlin to Baghdad railway project before the last Great War. Hence, Britain is threatened at all 4 vital points on its far-flung line of empire. At these points, and at these only, is it possible to perpetuate the vast naval blockade on which the British rely for victory in the long run. That is why the fate of the soldiers and sailors who fight today in the eastern Mediterranean under the Union Jack is so crucial for Britain, and in the last analysis, for all the independent nations of the world.
Mr. David H. Popper, Research Associate of the Foreign Policy Association, was today's speaker in the series America Looks Abroad. If you would like a free copy of this talk, address your request to the Foreign Policy Association, number 22 East 38th Street, New York City, or in care of the station to which you were listening. The Foreign Policy Association is a nonpartisan organization open to all who are interested in American foreign policy. It offers accurate information on current world happenings. In the world of today, foreign affairs are your affairs. We invite you to tune in next Sunday to hear another speaker in the America Looks Abroad series. This is the National Broadcasting Company.